Good evening or good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I'm Philip Roseman. I'm a cardiologist here in town, but in this venue, I'm the chairman of Shreveport Bossier Imperative. It is a loose organization of groups. That is the Chambers of Commerce of Shreveport and Bossier, the African American Chamber of Commerce, the Committee of 100 Community Foundation, cities of Shreveport and Bossier, parishes of Caddo and Bossier that have really gotten together because our belief is that education matters and that higher education matters because it provides opportunity for people where we are in our region. It is a foundation for the knowledge economy, economic development, and workforce development, so it's important to us. Shreveport Bossier is a city of a little over 300,000 people. We have probably closer to 400,000 people when you add just about 5 miles outside the city limits. We currently have, as far as four-year public university, we have 25 undergraduate programs and probably a dozen or 2 dozen or so, or dozen master's programs. No matter how you slice it, we're underserved. If you compare it to other cities in Louisiana, whether it be Lafayette or Baton Rouge or New Orleans, or even Monroe, we're underserved. If you compare it to other cities our size around the country, we're certainly underserved. So we've had a whole lot of ways that we've tried to tackle that problem. We have been to Baton Rouge, we've talked to commissions, we've talked to Board of Regents, we've had editorials in the paper, we've had the commissioners of higher education here, and we've had public meetings with them, we've had collaborations with other universities. To make a long story short though, we haven't moved a great deal in a positive direction in regards to meeting our needs as a community. And this year we decided to take a little bit different approach. And I don't know if you remember, but not back in the fall, the Commissioner of Higher Education, that's Dr. Purcell, came here and spoke to a group of us out at LSU Shreveport. And what he said was that there was a real need to look at regional education planning for higher education. And he challenged us to do that. And we took him up on this challenge. We wanted to look at this a little bit different. The problem was we didn't really have a lot of base of knowledge or information to be able to do that as a group of community leaders or business leaders. We knew that. That's where Eva Klein comes in. She's a national higher education consultant. She's well known all over the country. She's certainly well known here in Shreveport Bossier. She's been here before. She's worked on things for LSU Shreveport, for LSU Health Science Center, for the LSU system as a whole, statewide. We gave her this assignment. We said to Eva that what we want to look at is building a more comprehensive public university presence in the Shreveport Bossier metropolitan area. What could we do? What are the alternatives? What should we do? What would you recommend? And then how do we do it? How do we implement this sort of thing here in Shreveport Bossier? She's here to share her thoughts. She has put extraordinary time and effort in this. There is almost a 200-page study that accompanies this with a very detailed look. And I hope you'll be able to get it, digest it, and read it over the next few days to give more substance to what she's going to talk about today. I've read the first draft. It is bold. It's comprehensive. And it is certainly about change. I'm going to close with these thoughts about the town I love, the community I love, the community I think you love. Northwest Louisiana and Shreveport Bossier have never shied away from trying to deal with develop solutions for their own problems. We don't wait here necessarily for state government or Baton Rouge to make decisions about moving things forward in this community. It's just been a history of this community. For those of you who don't think that you can bring a college out of almost scratch, drive by Texas Avenue over in Bossier or down I-20 West and look over there. Bossier Parish Community College came about because there were people here that had innovative thought and innovative financing to build that. For those of you that believe that self-interest always rules the day, I want you to think about this when you drive past LSU Health Science Center. That health center started in the minds of physicians in practice here in Shreveport Bossier. Those physicians saw that there was a need for something greater for the good of health care in this community. And they went to Baton Rouge looking to find the money to try to build LSU Health Science Center. They were building their competitor, but they didn't care. It was for the good of the community. And for those of you who think consolidation in higher education is absolutely impossible, over 50 years ago we had 5 nursing programs here in Shreveport Bossier. They all got together and came together and became what is now the Northwestern School of Nursing, which is the 4th largest nursing school in the entire United States. There is a favorite quote of mine, and it is this. Peter Drucker says that it's the best way to predict the future is to create it. That's really what we're about today, about talking about having a conversation about. Eva Klein is going to give a presentation. I hope you'll be able to if you have questions, that you'll voice those questions and we can have a dialogue back and forth. And with that, I'd like to introduce Eva Klein, my special friend and a tremendous, tremendous consultant. Thank you.
Dr. Roseman, you didn't tell them they're allowed to throw tomatoes.
Although she says you're allowed to throw tomatoes, I would wish you wouldn't, because the mayor did us a favor by giving us this room, and I don't really want to clean it up.
Okay. You know, I don't know how good he is at fixing hearts, but the man's getting to be a great speaker on the subject of higher education, and every time he's getting to be a tougher and tougher act to follow. Good afternoon. I need to know who's here. I see a lot of familiar faces, but some I don't know. If you're from the business side of the community, raise your hand. Local government, school system, anybody like that? How about, is there anybody in the room from LSUS? Other universities? Community organizations? Okay. We have a lot of LSUS people here and some of all the categories, so that should make for a good mix of tomato throwing. I started my presentation this morning at 8 o'clock following on the Peter Drucker remark because I so fervently agree with it. I have an MBA from the Wharton School, and my strategic planning professor, Russell Akoff, really did not like corporate planning models at the time. He said they were all about predict and prepare, try to figure out what your competitor is going to do and prepare to deal with it. He said the only kind of planning that was worthwhile was to forget about all that and just design the future and create the future, the one that you want to create. And I think that that is very similar to that Drucker model. So I have based all my work in higher education largely on the theory of the fact that the future can be created and should be created. You don't have to have somebody else's ideas create your future for you. So I'm going to go through today. Is this a microphone as annoying to you as it is to me? I hear feedback. Is it okay? It's okay. All right. My presentation today follows the exact structure of the longer report document. Some of you may be relieved to know that as soon as I get home, I will get back to the task of trying to write a 3-page summary, and I will send that and make that available. But the truth of the matter is it's a really complicated subject, and I am never satisfied with trying to create one-pagers to answer really complex things, so it's a pretty long report. I actually don't have the report, and I need it somewhere in my bag. When the leadership asked me to do this, it is, as Dr. Roseman said, about looking at alternative models and assessing them and developing recommendations. But one additional thing I want to point out is that I did not think that there was something like a consensus about what exactly are the unmet needs. A lot of people talk about that and about the underserved business. So we felt it was very important before assessing solutions to correctly define the problem. So chapter 4 in the report, which builds on chapters 2 and 3, is a discussion of what we concluded are the unmet needs, and we thought that that was a very important way to start. I want to also comment that from working all over the country and sometimes overseas, I don't recall ever seeing a case where a local community and a state higher education governing agency partnered on a study of this kind. That the Board of Regents took the lead. They saw the community was getting organized to study some alternatives and asked if they could join the effort is a very unusual thing, and that made for some interesting times. We did the usual things every consultant likes to develop to describe their methodology. We used a lot of secondary data from various sources on the economy, higher education in the state, region, and the metro area. We did a lot of work to collect national data on models and examples elsewhere. But besides those secondary data sources, my colleague Joe Carter and I decided that we were going to devote most of our time to interviews because we felt that we needed to learn about the ideas and the concerns of the various constituents who are listed on the page there. I might be losing my voice. I'll try my best. The geography question here is very important because many of the studies of the higher education needs, met and unmet, have focused on a broader region than this study does. Typically, down in Baton Rouge, they think of the region as an 8-parish area. That's true, but the specific instructions to us were to focus primarily on the Shreveport-Bossier metro area. Of course, that means also looking at the rest of the region and the rest of the state for that matter, but the primary focus geographically was the metro area. And the other really important point is that I felt that undertaking this study was very risky because I felt that it could be that I would start out with 100 friends in Louisiana and end up with 1,000 enemies instead. I didn't want that to happen. I almost didn't want to do the study. I said that to Dr. Roseman. But the terms we agreed to were that I was not going to do the study if I was the voice and mouthpiece of any particular position or preconceived conclusion, and I was not going to do the study representing the local organizations or the regions or LSUS or tech or the systems, but only focused on the fact that the client is the people that are served by that establishment and structure. We felt that had to be, like putting blinders on, It's about the people and the community and the future. It's not about the politics. So chapter 2 is an overview in the report of factors about the economic area that should be taken into account. First thing to be said is it's nice that we did this right after the new census data because we have relatively newer numbers. It's a 400,000 person population in the metropolitan statistical area of the 3 parishes and the 2 cities. If you add the micropolitan area of Minden and Webster, it adds another 70,000 in what the federal government calls the Shreveport-Bossier Consolidated Statistical Area. For the most part, we were looking at the MSA, not CSA data. It's about 9% of the total state's population, and really surprisingly only 12% of the urban total population of the state. Very important to our considerations was to look at the racial mix in the MSA. And, got to put my glasses on. You'll notice that the black African-American population in Shreveport-Bossier, all the way over on the right, is about 39%, which is higher than that racial component in New Orleans, to my great surprise, and higher than the state overall. And then when you get down in the details, it is now the case that the city of Shreveport by itself, without the rest of the parish areas, is 54.7% African American in the new census data, which means that the minority now is the majority. That is not the case in Bossier City. So on a micro level, we have an MSA with a strong minority component population, and then two cities with two very different racial mixes. This, we thought, was something that we had to take into account in analyzing unmet needs. Looking at industries, there's a lot of data in the report about the current economy here, but maybe the simplest way to look at it is this one. Healthcare is by far the largest economic chunk by numbers employed. And the seventh bar over, I think it's the seventh, is healthcare other. That is like nursing homes and secondary, non-primary healthcare employers. If you added that to the first column, it would be even more noticeable that healthcare is the biggest business in the area, followed by government, which includes public schools, and education, which is primarily higher education. Next comes retail, entertainment, and happily, manufacturing has some kind of presence. That's a good thing. So I don't know of any single document that summarizes what's the future creation strategy that Drucker or my professor would say is a way of creating the future. There's no one document that I am aware of. So by combing through lots of documents and my own personal experience here, I made this list on the left. This is the world according to Eva. I believe these are the economic development strategies for creating the future in Shreveport-Bossier. Now, the two chambers, the three chambers, might have different lists, and they can help me amend this, but I believe these are the things you're pursuing. And the good news is that they align reasonably well with the state of Louisiana's target industries in their Blue Ocean initiative. The industries like entertainment and specialty healthcare and digital media are consistent. That means that you can expect that when you're doing the right things, trying to build assets or recruit companies, the state will be your ally because you are pursuing some of the things that the state cares about. Sorry, I am losing my voice. How do you faculty guys do it? All day long. So the conclusion of chapter 2 is that there is a future for Shreveport-Bossier that is being shaped and created. And some of the good things are starting to be revealed in relative rankings. I don't personally think rankings are very important, but the world pays attention to them. So it's a really good thing that Shreveport-Bossier is starting to get some visibility in some of these endless lists of things that people make. I really do believe that you're going to need to bear down on growing your presence in these competitive industries, and that to do that is going to require population growth. Most economic research concludes that a lot of the wealth creation and economic activity is going to be concentrated in metro areas. Sadly, the rural areas of America, now without the kind of farming presence that we used to have, will have a harder time sustaining the people there and sustaining jobs. So it is important to have larger and larger population, but especially what kind, not the kind that are illiterate, undereducated, dependent upon social services. What you want is growth of population of people with skills and with education. So it means that you want to attract people from other places. Higher education is one way to do that. Sometimes they come from another state and they complete their education here and then they stay in the community. But you certainly want to build the human capital pool as a critical part of building the future. Chapter 3 of the report goes on to look at the higher education context. At the state level, it is clear that in the last several years and now, there's been a lot of stuff, a lot of studies, commissions, things going on. It is a time of some turmoil. And I don't know that this is going to come to a stop anytime soon. Of particular relevance to this study are things like the Governance Commission had a recommendation in it about alignment of institutions and missions. The 2-year college study that just was released was very interesting. And the flagship coalition agenda, which has some results in the future that we don't know yet, you know, it's a work in progress, will have a big influence on what happens here. The good news is every other state I know of is going through the same kinds of serious considerations of how to do things differently. The report then goes on to provide a little compendium of the institutions. What are the assets we have now? Those domiciled in Shreveport-Bossier, those in the region. Notice that when the Board of Regents or others speak about the region, they're talking about 4 UL system institutions that are in the region, and the only 2 LSU institutions being the 2 in the city. The other side of the page shows some things that began to be evidence to us of unmet needs. We all know the University of Phoenix is a huge operation with an immense online footprint all over the world. You can live at the North Pole and, you know, get a degree from the University of Phoenix. So the University of Phoenix, being in business as a for-profit, also has a face-to-face component to their program, but they only put physical locations in places where they perceive that there is an underserved or unmet market need that they can meet. You have a University of Phoenix presence. I argue that by the fact that it's here, that is evidence that somebody who knows these markets and is savvy came here and saw that something was missing that they could fill and make money doing. Similarly, Ray Belton alerted us to the fact that Wiley College in Marshall, Texas, is the institution that more of his students are transferring to than Grambling, which I thought was odd, but it's system politics. So I then discovered, like this ad reveals, that not only is Wiley recruiting people to its campus, which we think is about 30 minutes drive away, but they've actually done their first foray into using a Shreveport location for delivering a business administration program. So like the University of Phoenix, this is another provider who has somehow seen some holes or gaps in the array of delivery here, in this case, baccalaureate programs for Black students who complete SUSLA. So since we're talking about public institution in Shreveport-Bossier, one has to take a long look at LSU. LSU in Shreveport is a very good institution. It has a lot of niches of strengths. They're enumerated. Hopefully I got them all in the report. There are a lot of interesting accomplishments, also at least some of them enumerated in the report. For purposes of the short version in the PowerPoint, this data at the bottom is the Board of Regents Enhancement Award Productivity Analysis, which was sent to me by the LSU System Office They loaded me down with data about all the cool things happening at LSUS, and I was very grateful for that. But if you look at the per faculty and per instructional faculty award productivity, those big green bars, those are LSUS, outperforming everyone. So there are a lot of really wonderful things happening and a lot of great faculty and a lot of great programs. But the problem is, it is too small in 2011. Maybe years ago it wouldn't have mattered, but in the kind of economic conditions we're in, it is too small to have the ability to invest in itself, to have loose money to develop new programs or take new initiatives easily. That's hard to do with the small enrollment. And that enrollment has been hovering in a range for a long time. It's been about 4,300 students on average for about 30 years. LSU's concerns have been expressed to me in a lot of forms, including in prior work with LSU. It's a lot about some of the programs that were not approved. It's about role, scope, mission issues. I'm familiar with the long history of things that were precluded over time, like being a 2-year institution, later getting baccalaureate but no residential. Lots and lots of things that have happened. The fact that LSU's support in this community has not generated the right kind of response from Baton Rouge is also something that has been a concern. And in more recent times, although there were a lot of program development ideas, the region's moratoria on program approvals has been a factor. Even more recently, Vince has given us a list of program ideas for formal proposals that I don't think exist yet. Vince, where are you? Those have not been actually formally submitted in any form, am I right?
No, the EDD has been sent forward.
The EDD.
Has been sent forward to
The new version of it, not consortium?
No, the new version.
Okay. The rest of the ones on that short list you gave us a few weeks ago have not yet been submitted?
No.
Okay. But there's a good list. There's some work that we did in 2009. I think that there's a lot of material from which to develop a forward plan for programs. So the conclusions of Chapter 3 are that it's a time of a lot of change. I like to say this, I know I have a lot of faculty in the room, so you're going to have to bear with me here and give me a little leeway. There's a thing about higher education. Maybe the top 1% of our country's smartest people are in our colleges and universities. These are by and large people with PhDs, with great intellectual capacity and achievements. They are innovators, they are creators of new knowledge, preservers of knowledge in their disciplines, and everything they do is about thinking and creating, except when it comes to how we actually operate the university. That little dichotomy strikes me as fascinating. We can innovate in curing cancer, but we won't change much about how the faculty senate meets or deals with stuff, because those things are embedded in very long and dearly held traditions and not so easy to let go of. So the average college or university is the most change-averse institution anywhere. That said, here's the bad news. I do not think that our model, as we've practiced it in my lifetime, from early in this century or mid-century to now, is sustainable. We are gonna have to think of different ways to organize, to deliver, to keep reaching for new knowledge, to engage more adults, to do more outreach to business, industry, community, schools. It's a different game. So on the local level, I think we convinced ourselves, Joe and I, that there truly is a reason not to think about the 8-parish region always as the planning template, that there are some cases where the cities of Shreveport, Bossier, this MSA, have to be thought of a little differently than the rest of the region. Not for everything, but for some things, there has to be a distinction made. And so we come to the idea that program duplication is of two types. Some is pointless or unnecessary, and some is very purposeful. And there might be times when we have to duplicate programs because it makes better sense than thinking that just because it's in Monroe, it means it's accessible to the 35-year-old mother of 2 kids with a full-time job who might be able to go to a class in the early evening, but she is not going to go to Monroe. So the region versus metro area, we believe is important. Then I have to tell you, I've been a lot of places. I do not know a lot of places where more effort and attention has been given to collaboration than here. These institutions, as far as I know, through CERT, 2+2 programs, various things that Vince has tried on the doctoral level as collaborative programs, many, many examples. You are way ahead of other places in the efforts that you have put on collaboration. But that does not mean that there isn't fierce competition, nonetheless, among these same institutions for enrollment. And this is a basic human nature story. The budget comes based on enrollment. So it's very hard to tell somebody, yeah, you know, just give away 100 of your students, because that will mean a budget cut. And it is not sensible for people to do things that are counter to their interests. So the collaborations are hard to do, and yet there have been a lot of efforts, some successful, some less so. I am losing my voice. Hold on a second. I'll be back. If you did this 4 times, would you be still in voice? Then to the conclusions about LSU is just simply, we haven't had the growth in that institution that one would have reasonably expected over all these years. And we may differ in this room. There could be 100 different opinions about exactly what is the culprit. But I think it's not worth worrying about who's to blame. It is just worth saying that there were a lot of factors, some of which that LSU could have done differently, many of which LSUS had no control over. And one of those is competition from UL institutions, for example. But nonetheless, taken all together, there has been a path of no growth, and being small is hard to do things new. So that takes us to the conclusions about unmet needs. Has been studied many times before. There's a summary of each of these studies in the report. The Community Foundation has an annual report card on the community, and in the 2010 edition used Columbus, Baton Rouge, Jackson, and Montgomery as peer cities. Shreveport Bossier is the green, and Baton Rouge is the blue, and then Columbus, Jackson, and Montgomery. And you can see that Shreveport Bossier has lower percentage or concentration of graduate and professional degrees in the population, and lower than some, not all, at the baccalaureate level. This chart was done for Dr. Marsal and Dr. McDonald when we did the merger concept analysis for the 2 LSU institutions. So I call this the antique data. I didn't update it because I think that the numbers today would only make the point even more exaggerated. But these are cities we pulled out of census data, 2000 census data at that time, for cities that are approximately the same, or MSAs approximately the same size. And we looked at what public institutions they had in those places and pulled the then 2004 enrollment data for those institutions. And if you ignore an anomaly like Madison, Wisconsin, which has the big dog institution, and you look instead at a place like Kalamazoo, a smaller city, it had then at Western Michigan University, another former client of mine, At that time, 30,000 students. It may well be much more now. But one of the real oddities in this is Florida Gulf Coast University, which is the 10th institution in the Florida system, which was created in Florida only a few years before this, and already after only a few years of operation, had numbers closing in on 6,000 students, about 50% larger than LSUS. By now, it might be, I don't know, somewhere ranging toward the 10,000. And that's in the smaller community of Fort Myers. Now, to look at education attainment by the numbers, it's New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Shreveport, Bossier, Lafayette, the average of the four, and then in the last column, Shreveport Bossier's variance from the average. And you can clearly see we're doing pretty well in generating high school graduates and in associate degrees, but not so well at the bachelor's and graduate levels in terms of the percentage in the population. When you get beyond Louisiana and start comparing Louisiana with the SREB states and the US, it doesn't look so good for Louisiana. Louisiana has made some progress, if you look at the lower right quadrant, from 16% with baccalaureate degrees to 21%. But in 2009, when Louisiana got to 21%, it was then at the same place that the 50 states for the US were at 20.3% 20 years earlier. So since everybody is advancing, you're not advancing fast enough to catch up with any of this. And to make a competitive story much worse, this is how I see it. Shreveport Bossier has to compete in a global knowledge economy. That competition for high-end economic activity requires more and more and more talent, skill, knowledge, and education. Innovation capacity is on the lips of every economic development person now, and that innovation capacity depends very heavily on the university presence and the things that it does. So if Shreveport Bossier has to compete in that global economy, here's the way it looks. Shreveport Bossier is underperforming the state in bachelor's degrees, taking that as a proxy for all, because you could go associate, bachelor's, graduate, but taking bachelor's as a proxy. Shreveport Bossier underperforms Louisiana. Louisiana underperforms the SREB 15 southern states. The southern states underperform the entire US. And to make the whole thing totally calamitous, the US is totally underperforming many other countries in the world. So this is not a recipe for competitiveness. Something has to be done to massively increase the numbers of people we enroll, support, help get through to completion, and supply into that pool of talented people and innovators and maybe entrepreneurs or technical employees. We have to do more. Does anybody know which is the country with the highest percentage of college graduates? Number one, Canada, our near neighbor. Number two, anybody want to guess number two? Israel. After that, there's some smattering, I keep forgetting the order, Sweden, China, maybe UK, I don't know, this and that. And you get down to like number 8, and that's where the US is. It's not good. So, and we're lagging the US. So we have a huge, huge undertaking here. That means more faculty, more students, more good programs, more people coming through at higher levels of attainment. If they're at high school now, we need them to the associate level. If they're at the associate level, we have to make it easy for them to go on to the baccalaureate level, and so forth. And this matters. This matters unless we just want to be a poor economy. So the conclusions, this is an important page. What are the unmet needs? Well, the unmet needs are of 3 kinds. We are, in fact, missing some degree programs we ought to have. We could argue all day long, Vince and I, about which are the highest priorities about those, and that doesn't matter. But the fact is, the array of programs available at the baccalaureate level and the graduate levels needs to be expanded. 2, somewhat independent of the programs, but not totally independent, because some more occupation-related degree programs would help the underserved. But somewhat independent is the fact that we are not doing nearly enough, despite the collaborations and the 2+2s, not enough yet to get the adult who's 35 years old and never went to college to feel comfortable coming back. Scheduling programs, I don't know what, we have to do more of that. And we are not doing nearly enough yet to get higher participation rates of the African American majority population in this community. They have to go to college more. Now, we could spend the rest of the week going into the K-12 part of this problem. And somebody asked me that question this morning, can you tell us what's wrong with K-12? And I yelled out to Dr. Roseman or Jack or somebody, call American Airlines and cancel my flight. I can't leave till next week if he wants that answer. That is a big, complicated story. But we have to do something about K-12 or America goes down in flames. But that said, at the university level in this community, we have got to do better with those segments or we lose the economic war. Third component is the hardest one to put into words. Everybody here calls it economic development, but a lot of people who say that don't really know what they mean by universities' functions in economic development. This has been my bread and butter, my focus of attention for 25 years. So I have a very good idea of what I mean. And I mean that we are not in the teaching, research, and service business anymore. We are in the human capital, innovation system, and quality of place business these days. That the 21st century university must do research, but research is way too simple and limited a way of thinking about it. It has to have extensive outreach functions. It has to be willing to be a problem solver. We have all this talent. Not every bit of it needs to be in the form of funded research. We need universities to go out there and say to businesses or schools or social service organizations, we're your university, what can we do for you today? And set up, it's hard to get funded. It has to be set up like the 19th century agricultural extension program. And the doing of that, by the way, some people call it engaged scholarship, has to be worked into recognition for the faculty. There are a lot of really interesting intellectual problems that can be solved in applied settings that may not have an NIH grant attached to them, but that can be very rewarding experiences intellectually for faculty and their students. And I think this is going to be the central model before too long in most higher education settings. So my argument is there are 3 different kinds of needs, and when we look at examining alternatives, we have to find solutions that meet all 3 of these categories. So in chapter 5, we summarized our national research. The figure on this page is a model developed by PricewaterhouseCoopers for the UK higher education establishment, showing a continuum from informal collaborations to merger with shared departments and other things along the way, because this is actually an enormously hot topic in the UK right now. They're looking at doing huge restructuring and merging of various institutions. There are also at least 4 or 5 states where mergers are on the agenda right now. In my own home state of New Jersey, they just announced a complete restructuring of Rutgers University and University of Medicine and Dentistry, and Rowan University and other things are going to shuffle the deck quite a bit. And Georgia just announced the Board of Regents has decided to turn 8 of its institutions into 4. It's going to do 4 mergers, 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 in Georgia. So these are the 4 models that we looked at. You got an institution, grow it in place, program collaborations, that is defined as 2 institutions or more where faculty from both are involved in the delivery of the program, as opposed to importation, where you just wholesale bring a program from somewhere else, and finally the consolidation model. In addition, just to make work more complicated, we looked less comprehensively, but some, at 4 additional ideas that were given to us by interviewees. 1, the Georgia Tech Emory lash-up in bioengineering, which was of some interest to the Biomedical Research Foundation. 2nd, the Indiana University, Purdue University merged operation in Indianapolis, which was suggested to us by John Lombardi. Thirdly, there were those who wanted us to go back and revisit the question of a possible consolidation of LSUS with LSU Health Sciences in Shreveport. And fourthly, there were at least a few interviewees who said, well, if we're going to think about the 2-way merger as an option, why don't we also look at the option of a 3-way merger and add the Health Sciences Center and Tech and LSUS together. So we did some brief review of these. The evaluation started with creating some principles, or I like to call them a screen, for what is it going to take to end up a plus or a minus in the analysis. And we tried to organize those, keeping in mind the 3 unmet needs: programs, the underserved, and innovation capacity. But in addition, there are some administrative things. For example, we did not think a solution was a solution if it would take 20 or 30 years to bear fruit. A solution had to be capable of delivering at least some change in the near term, although obviously more change would occur over time. And we assumed through all of this that total online solutions don't work, that we would never not have an actual campus and institution here. And for the most part, that meant assuming that LSUS Shreveport continues to exist, although in one of the options it would be merged with another institution, but that there would be an LSUS somehow. For each of the models, we started going pros and cons. And very quickly, Joe and I realized that was not going to work. That in the case of advantages, there were some things that would have to happen in order for those advantages to actually come to bear. So we called those requirements. And then similarly, in the case of disadvantages or risks, there were some things that could be done to mitigate those disadvantages. So we ended up with a 4-part assessment: advantages, requirements, disadvantages, and mitigation. And as we went through looking at the 4 main models through this 4-part prism, we ended up noticing very quickly that there wasn't a silver bullet, that none of these models, which all had pluses and minuses, would necessarily solve all of the needs, because we were focused on the 3 kinds of unmet needs. And that in the end, there would be a primary model, and that some aspects of the other models might then also have to be brought to bear to get a total solution. So I'm not going to go through these pros and cons pages much, but they're in the report. This stuff on the PowerPoint page is way too brief to be meaningful. I really urge you to please read the correct versions, because there's much more to it. But in the briefest way, the idea of growing LSUS is very attractive for being the most obvious, least disruptive, most normal way of doing things. The problems are that we have to totally change how we do it, because however we've been trying to do it, the growth has not occurred. So the risk is to continue doing the same things the same way. That would not be likely to work. Model 2, expand program collaborations. Well, this is quicker to do in some respects, but the negatives are the things I said before. You have to have willing partners, and somebody's got to help you with some incentives to want to do things that might otherwise be unnatural acts and giving up budget. So it's tricky to do, although it is possible. Third, import programs. Well, the best thing going for this model is that theoretically the sky's the limit. At least in theory, you could import petroleum engineering from Texas A&M, Chinese literature from Tsinghua University in Beijing, creative writing from Goddard College, anything you want from anywhere. Now, the provider also would have to be willing, but in theory, anything could happen. Anything could be brought here. The huge weakness is that it really risks undermining the local institution as a primary model. So we felt that program importation might have its uses on a very selected and limited basis where it made sense. So then you get to the fourth idea, and that is consolidate. I assure you that in the report, the treatment of this is a little longer than the others because we worked really hard at trying to understand, is this a good idea? If so, how? Is it a bad idea? If so, why? So a lot of thought went into this. And clearly the big advantage is 70 miles away, there's an institution that has already role, scope, and mission, and more importantly than role, scope, and mission, a big array of the kinds of programs that we think might be needed here in Shreveport-Bossier at baccalaureate and graduate levels. Some things I think we need here, they don't have. But by and large, there is an automatic pool of programs not present here that if we think they're priorities could be brought here. The sifting and the figuring out which are the most important is for somebody else to do. We couldn't get into that detail. For example, automatically, if there's a justification for engineering programs, nobody to have to fight. It can be done. Some doctoral programs, various other things. So that's the big strength. On the other side, on the disadvantaged side, the big thing is it's a mess. It's stressful, it's complicated. We think it generates some costs, one-time costs, different student information systems, semester quarter calendar. How do we take our 2 English departments and make them into one stronger, better English department? You know, a million things have to be done that represent real work and require your efforts and creativity. So it is not an easy solution. The Georgia Tech Emory model, a really interesting story. Of course, they got a $25 million gift from Coulter. A $25 million gift will make a lot of things easier, right? Only Jim Henderson gets that kind of money in this town, right? Not this week. Okay. We concluded that yes, absolutely, this model has some application. We have people at Tech in engineering. We have people in the Health Sciences Center in medicine. We have science faculty and even business faculty and others at LSUS who also could be part of a bioengineering initiative. So for my money, I think the community, the community should, now I think this is, by the way, I gotta say, this is independent of the merger question. I think this should happen anyway. The Indiana model, we read a lot about the history of this. You know, this goes all the way back to 18-something, I think 1870-something, when Indiana University dispatched one faculty member to go teach a course in a schoolhouse building in Indianapolis, and slowly over time, Indiana and Purdue both created outposts and blah, 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 blah. It went on and on and on. There was a lot of development. And then in '69, this actually was a form of a merger. It's got collaboration elements to it, but the historian who is on their website, having written the history of this, refers to it consistently as a merger. If it is a merger, it's a kind of unusual merger. Indiana University runs the entire campus and delivers the biggest share of the programs. Purdue provides the science, engineering, and technology programs. And the complex name, the compound name, I imagine, is on the diplomas. We just couldn't see that the very special circumstances of two enormous institutions based elsewhere, both with presence in the city, was the same circumstance as Shreveport, so we don't really see how it could be applied here. The consolidation of the two LSU institutions in Shreveport-Bossier is something we've studied before. It's attractive in that it sounds good. It still sounds good to me. But when you really take it apart and you look at faculty, program, facilities, all these things, it doesn't quite amount to an automatic synergy. The kind of programs we need that LSUS would want to develop don't exist in the Health Sciences Center either. So there still would have to be a lot of the same resource acquisition and program development that we thought would be needed when we wrote about this in 2005. And finally, the three-way merger. We have an opinion here to not have an opinion. Unlike the one I just talked about, where I actually did a study in 2005 and have some knowledge of what it would be like to merge the health sciences and LSUS, we do not have anywhere nearly the kind of data that would be needed to look at this three-way merger, the hospital issues and system issues and many, many things. So what we think about this is that it's a really intriguing idea, because now with the three institutions, you'd have a much bigger university in the north of the state. The politics of it would be daunting, but we think it's an idea that may have merit, either now or if not now at some future time, but based on not having done any real analysis and thoughtful work on it, we do not have the ability to actually make a recommendation on it at this time. So, narrowing the options, because collaboration and importation don't get you far enough toward your three unmet needs, though they can play a role. It came down to growing LSUS or consolidating LSUS and Tech. Then came the ugly question, well, in either of those cases, in which system? And for the consolidation option, we started out thinking, Joe and I, that the obvious answer was that the new Tech LSUS consolidated institution should be in the LSU system. Subsequently, as a result of interviews and press that we're reading and understanding the flagship agenda and reorganization possibilities, we literally changed our mind about that and decided that it would be far wiser to, if you're going to do this consolidation, make it an institution in the UL system. Similarly, for the option of growing LSUS, we went down the same hard and ugly road of trying to figure out the right system. And obviously, we started with the assumption if it is an LSU institution, it would stay in the LSU system. But for similar reasons, the flagship research agenda being important to this, if the LSU system, which already is dominated by larger research institutions, goes even further down the road of clarifying that system mission, or if it goes down the road of becoming a one LSU model that some are promoting, no system at all, is really hard to see how the struggles of a 4,000, 4,500 student institution that needs to grow basic programs, opportunities for students, faculty capacities, faculty research, all those things that have to grow would be a priority in the larger scheme of things. It's just really hard to see that. So we ended up dumbfounding ourselves, Joe and I, by ending up concluding that either way, the Grow LSUS or the consolidation model, we think it should be in the UL system. So here comes the wrap up. Are you ready? I'm going to let you go anytime now. Recommendation 1, consolidate the two institutions, creating an enlarged new single university with 2 campuses. That means merging the departments, the faculties. I think one of the things I may not have mentioned is that for LSUS faculty who care about research, not everybody might find this equally important, they would now find themselves part of a university that is trying to promote research, as opposed to a university that is being constantly told that it either isn't valued for doing research or literally trying to be thwarted from doing research. So there are some hidden potential benefits here. But it's really important to me, and I have said this to Dan Renaud and everybody else who would listen, if this is the model, we better understand that it is one university now if we do this, but it's not a Ruston University with a funky little branch campus in Shreveport. This has to be, and there are models for this, one university with 2 important places where it's carrying out its mission. One happens to be in a small town and the older original campus, and one is its new exciting urban campus where they help grow the programs by collaborations between the 2. I frankly think that Dan Renaud must know that in this new world that I live in, 2011, some faculty don't want to go to live in a small town. So at some point, being in a little town will place limitations of growth on institutions that are in such locations. Of course, it won't matter for Penn State. If you're already humongous, being in College Park is fine. But you had to get humongous in the 19th century and 20th century. If you're little and you're in a small town now, the likelihood of becoming a big institution is less than it used to be in the past. So this possibility of having a 2 campus, 2 different kinds of locations, recruiting people, one, they might like one better than another, opens up some flexibilities, makes immediately a 16,000 16,000 student institution, and could work. You need to look in the report when you get it, because all of these are stripped out for purposes of the PowerPoint. There's discussion under each of these recommendations and sub-recommendations. And what 1A says, and I don't know whether the regents or anybody will agree with this, but Joe and I feel really strongly that a conditional approval or some kind of format, if this were to go forward, has to be contingent upon the development of a comprehensive and detailed implementation plan. This has to be de-stressed, if it's done, by a period where the 2 faculties and administrations can sit down and actually work through the 50 or 100 things that would have to get resolved, from name of the football team to things I really care about, calendar, department merging, program revisions, which are the new programs that are priorities, who's got what software for the student information system. There's a lot of stuff. There is a lot of stuff. It is not just as easy as repainting the airplanes. So we think that the main way to de-risk this and to give comfort that something real will happen is to approve the merger. For example, legislature approve it subject to an effective date and upon submission of a detailed, cogent plan for how the whole thing is going to end up with 1 + 1 = 3, and not something lesser. If that cannot be accomplished, because there isn't support, there aren't enough people who believe it would be an advance, then our alternative recommendation is move LSU Shreveport into the UL system and work on trying to grow it from there. There's some justifications for that in the report. Obviously, the ugly part of this is it would mean a name change. But it might mean, for example, that you don't get to be stomped on competitively by 4 UL institutions, because now you're one of them and the system would have to mediate those things. Right now, LSUS is surrounded by 4 of them, and they don't have to care about LSUS. So there's some things about this that could be viable. Recommendations 3 and 4 are really sort of independent, which way you choose, 1 or 2. This one is about intellectual capacity, innovation capacity, to some extent about research. We think that the primary providers of research in the region are Tech and Health Sciences Center. LSUS also has some research programs and activities. But I want to tell you that everything's relative. The last NSF data I looked at, Health Sciences Center is hovering around $25 million a year, and Tech at $18 million a year. Neither one of those are big research operations. So the point would be to put together what the faculty of all 3 are doing and really articulate an agenda. Number 3B is working with industry and articulating an agenda for what areas of research are important, aligned with industries that are important, and putting all the talent we have to work on that. Separately, I really think that the Georgia Tech Emory example for bioengineering provides a model that should be adapted, specifically in biomedical engineering. Tech already has a program in that it's small. They need the medicine part. There are LSUS faculty who also could be part of that. In the merger, my money would be on going to find a very deep pocket donor to do what Coulter did in Atlanta and to get busy writing a plan for this right away. It's a field in which you can compete. And the third part of this recommendation is I'm your university, what can I do for you today? Bigger focus on outreach and problem solving in the community. Recommendation 4, similarly, I think is independent of recommendations 1 and 2. And you need to read the details in the report about this because it names BIPC by name, it names SUSLA by name, and it names Centenary by name. But the fact is, this has to be about not how do we split up a small pie. Does somebody know how many people do we enroll in Shreveport Bossier now? Is it about 10,000 students? Vince, help me. 14. What I want to see is I want that number to go to 44,000 or 34,000. So there are things that Centenary should be doing and can be doing in this mix. There are already great collaborations between the 2-year and 4-year institutions. I say great, we need more. We could, for example, to help some of the young African American students at SUSLA, think of doing some programs where the baccalaureate, with some of the 2-year programs offered at the LSUS campus, and the baccalaureate level engages LSUS and SUSLA faculty so that we can help the comfort and the cultural and the transitions from 2-year to 4-year programs. BIPC's running out of space. Henderson is soon going to own the universe. But at the present time, while there's some capacity, we could do more for the general adult population, whether they be white, black, green, or polka dotted, that working place-bound adult, by using some of LSU's facilities for BIPC programs and bringing those BIPC and LSU programs even closer together than the collaborations we have now. So this is all about, we do some good stuff, we could and we must do more to get more people into the system, and the institutions, merged or not merged, should be working on that. And finally, whichever way this goes, it needs a communications plan. And a meeting like today is just one tiny piece of that. And there has to be a dialogue among the constituents and stakeholders. I'll tell you one little secret hope I have. If a merger were to be found to be a good, bold solution, it has the possibility of bringing the Ruston legislative delegations and the Shreveport-Bossier delegation into a common cause and presenting for the north part of the state a little bit of a stronger force to counter that big weight that always is down there where they outnumber you by so much. So one small bright side to this might be being able to argue harder for this part of the state and the needs for higher education. I took up too much of your time. I want to tell you something. This was not fun. I did have 100 friends in Louisiana. When I'm done, I'll probably have 1,000 enemies. We did an honest job, though. I tried really hard not to be Vince Marsallo's guy or not to be Dan Renault's guy. I certainly didn't see myself as the Regent's guy. We kept our eye on the ball of what does this community really need? And how are we in the delivery system going to organize to do it better? I feel that we came by these conclusions honestly, with starting with open minds. Others could come to different conclusions, but I think that what we have concluded is correct, at least based on the interview data and the data that we have looked at. Final word, this is an ugly kind of prospect, trying to think about reconstructing in some different way things we're familiar with. Be aware that it is going on everywhere else. So at least it might be some small comfort that you're not the only people being put through this kind of rethinking of your future. It is your future to create. Thank you very much.
Open for questions for Eva.
What happens to the traditional liberal arts college in this restructuring?
Centenary.
Do you
mean Centenary?
No, I'm not talking about Centenary per se. I'm talking about how you could use Centenary as an example.
Excuse me, Eva, sir, if you guys mind staying at the mic so that everybody can hear.
Certainly. My question is simply what happens to the traditional liberal arts college in this schematic that you have?
Well, I'm a product of one of those. There's nothing I love more than liberal arts colleges. Mine was actually a public institution and a women's college. It was Douglas College of Rutgers, and I am myself one of those alumni who was mergered away. We no longer have Douglas College. It was merged with Rutgers College. And I'll never get over it. I probably, till the day I die, never put on my resume that I'm an alumna of Rutgers. So I understand the liberal arts college thing. I think that there is a way in which the traditional liberal arts programs and disciplines should be able to continue and coexist with programs that are also a little bit more pragmatic and outside world oriented. My favorite idea, for example, has been why can't we have liberal arts majors that are dual majors? I majored in French literature. Why couldn't I have had a dual major in French literature and management? Or French literature and international relations or international business? In the days when I went to college, that wasn't possible. I still don't see very many places do it. So I feel very threatened by the decline of enrollments in the liberal arts. And I'm dearly hoping that we're going to find ways to take the mountain to Muhammad, because Muhammad is not coming to the mountain in numbers like it used to be in 40 years ago. We have to rethink it, and we have to make the two things coexist, or we will find fewer and fewer people pursuing those disciplines, and that would be a drastic shame. It'd be deadly, in fact, for the future of those disciplines. It's got to be worked. You know, you cannot make the liberal arts college model survive by ignoring all this other stuff. That's not a solution. It has to be embedded and integrated. Next.
In your original problems that you were trying to solve, one of them was the racial makeup that you were trying to address to get greater college degrees in the African American or minority.
Majority now, minority.
Majority, minority. How does this merger address that issue for the Shreveport-Bossier population? And why wasn't Grambling put into this mix as well? I mean, in other words, how does the Louisiana Tech LSU merger address the comfortable nature, I guess, of encouraging more African American or minority population to get the college degree?
To the extent that some of it is program diversity, it automatically helps a little by making some more technical degree options available that are hard to get now or that we don't have at all. But I've already conceded that there was no solution in my array of 4 models that equally and totally met all 3 of my conditions of unmet needs. So this new, in the merger scenario, we solve role, scope, and mission. We solve largely degree program growth and flexibility. We do not automatically solve bringing more majority-minority students into the system unless we make it happen that way. That's why recommendation 4 is in here, and why I say even if nothing happens on recommendation 1 and 2, recommendation 4 should happen. So I go back to what I said. Not one of those solutions automatically solves the problem of the African American participation. Program importation does nothing for that, and just growing LSUS does nothing for that. The only one that comes close to frontally addressing the problem of underserved populations is the program collaboration model, which is why we say in recommendation 4 that those collaborations, however nice they are now, must be intensified. It's the only model that comes close to getting us to where we need to bring those people more into the system. And even that isn't enough. Depends on a lot of K-12 things and other factors.
Do you have any idea what the kind of resources are going to be required to do this financially between the institutions are, and where those resources would come from in our current climate?
This is a matter of great discussion. We did not do a budget because it was well beyond our possible knowledge base to begin to figure out merging departments and all these things that would have to happen. Also, it would take another year, and we had a 3-month schedule for this thing. So you will find in the report, without numbers, a discussion and a list of the costs of a merger, followed by a discussion of a list of some savings that may accrue from a merger, but without numbers. We also understand that if we tell anybody it's going to cost anything, it's going to turn people off to even thinking about the merits of the idea. And I really would hope that people would think about, is this a good idea or is this a bad idea, before they zoom in on the money question. There have to be costs of 2 kinds. Some are the time and people effort costs of the faculties and the leaderships of the 2 institutions that have to buckle down and solve a bunch of problems. So while they're doing that, they're not doing something else. There are out-of-pocket costs. For example, if there are 2 contracts with food services and for some reason they have to be blended automatically. I don't think that would be the case. I think you could probably run out the contracts separately at the two places before you do a single contract. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the details are. So there could be contract buyouts. There could be cases of faculty who want to leave, and so there's recruitment costs for, replacing faculty. There could be software that has to be purchased because there's two different information systems. I mean, there's stuff. I think the people in this community would try really hard to get some private funds. I think some of it will have to come out of existing hide of people in the institutions. And I'm not willing to give up on the idea that if the state thinks that this is in the interest of the state, that some public money would be provided for these one-time costs. But I don't have a number to give you. It would be irresponsible completely to try to pull a number without really looking at the details.
I'm asking for your opinion. Do you think all adults should have a college education?
I have been in higher education all my life. You're giving me a trick question. I would be happy, really happy, finally, if every human being on the planet had a college education, at any age, adult or whatever. I love to see the odd story now and then in the news of the 80-year-old grandmother who just got her college degree. I'm incapable of not being an advocate for learning and lifelong learning. So I guess the answer has to be yes, I think every adult should have a college degree. And some of them may do it for very pragmatic purposes because they used to work in a factory where, high school was enough, and now that kind of job doesn't exist, so they need to be able to put food on the table for their family. Others might go back to college just because if I had a chance to go back to college, I would study 4 or 5 more foreign languages because I just love foreign languages. But everybody should have lifelong education.
A follow-up. As part of your research, did you interview students in the community and at LSU and Tech?
We did not.
The reason I'm asking is to find out why they are in college and if they felt prepared. And I know perhaps this is beyond the scope of your study, but many of us find that our students, and I'm talking about juniors and seniors, have difficulty writing sentence and doing basic math and statistics. And maybe this relates to what you said about K through 12, and that's so, that's
if you want, I'll call American Airlines, cancel the flight tomorrow. I'm serious. Don't get me started, because if you wind me up on the K to 12 thing, we'll be here next Wednesday, and we'll have to have the pizzas sent in, every meal, because there is no question that our faculty in our colleges and universities are having to act like they're doing collegiate level work with people who come in so unprepared that they can't do college level work. People like Jim Henderson are supposed to be fixing that, but it's too late. It's got to happen in the first grade and preschools and huge drastic things. Please don't get me started because I get on this subject and I start hyperventilating. But if we do nothing else in this country but fix that problem, that would be enough to make me happy. I'd die a happy woman. I used to be a high school teacher. I am a certified high school teacher. I have a master's in secondary curriculum and instruction in my little collection of 3 masters. One's in French literature, one is in education, and one is the MBA. I taught high school in an alternative school and had a wonderful 2-year experience. I know a little something about teaching high school. There's not a day that goes by that I don't go crazy reading the news and watching TV. We are letting the whole thing go down the drain because you know what we're doing? Remember the second page of this presentation? It's all about the institutions, the school boards, the teachers, the communities. It's not about the customers. It's not about the kids and the families that have to be completely refocused and things change in the fundamental model. This is a 19th century model. It was designed for the industrial economy when we took them off the farms and put them in factories. It doesn't work. It needs to be completely redesigned. So if you want me to, I'll cancel the flight tomorrow and we can go on and on about this because I have a lot of things to say about it. And it doesn't help. So I went to the Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania, probably a decent enough credential. They taught me nothing. They taught me nothing about the fundamentals of how to make it work where it isn't working. They taught me all the usual stuff about, methods. Where are our schools of education? Why aren't they screaming with their hair on fire, making some change happen in the enterprise? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Did you get my opinion? Ay, don't come at me with another K-12 question, but I'll take any other kind of question.
Obviously, as a faculty at LSUS, it would be my goal to grow the institution as well. I'm interested in your opinion as to if we're to grow the number of students, what type of students are we going to be attracting based on your recommendations? Are we still going to be growing more non-traditional students, or are we growing to the traditional student model as well? And where would they be coming from? Because currently, when I look at the student populations that I see, most of them are definitely non-traditional, or they have transferred from another institution, been out of college.
What do you teach?
Something like that, computer science.
See?
So I see a lot of people that, had to come with what they would call a fallback, plan, and that's where they are. So I'm just interested in where would this come from, because if we're trying to grow the research innovation agenda, then we need people who are there with it and are growing that idea as well.
So the question is, what kind of students?
What kind of students? And I've seen the study.
My best guess is that we will continue to have a stream of 18-year-olds coming out of high schools, and that the numbers of those will rise and fall with the birth rate. 18 years later, we'll have whatever we were producing 18 years earlier. That I think we will see larger and larger numbers trying to go to college, with fewer and fewer able to really do college-level work unless we go back to this other subject. And then it is my humble but correct opinion that there will be an avalanche of adults who didn't get a college degree coming back, and they will be focused. They will not be interested in the football games and the clubs. They will be doing this because they have to do it in order to have a life and, keep a family together. They're going to need to have a BA and a BS in business administration, or learn some kind of technical computer skills, or become a nurse or something in order to be able to survive and raise a family and live. They will be very pragmatic students. I believe they will be the vast majority before it's over. They will outnumber the 18-year-old traditional age students by a lot.
This would be the same for LSU residents, not just in general.
I think so. LSUS is an urban university without really being an urban university. For one thing, I've pointed out to people, where you are in Southeast Shreveport, for a girl who grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and lived in Manhattan and downtown Paris, that's not an urban location. That's a suburban location. By the demographics, urban institutions, particularly in the north where we don't have the HBCU stuff, they might have 80% Black and Latino students in their populations. Places like Jersey City State University, another former client of mine. So there's urban institution and urban institution. I think that LSUS's particular place in that general picture I drew is that I would like to see it have a really big share of the market currently being sucked up by University of Phoenix, of the focused, purposeful adults. I'd like to see it become the baccalaureate institution of choice for many of the young majority folks in town. I would like to see it have a residential program and be recruiting well beyond Shreveport, because I believe that enriches the culture to have people from other places, makes the campus a livelier community, and very selfishly, we know that higher education are recruiters of people to the community from other places, because many of those people would stay and become part of the community. So I see a residential piece that's pretty traditional, and I see a big non-traditional piece, big diversity in the age and the racial mix.
Has your programming in some way assessed the quality of education, the probability of students to get a job? The reason I'm asking this is you have to study from Dr. Wetter from Ohio University. 50% of the waiters and 50% of the postmen in America have a bachelor's degree, and the experience for me as a faculty is when I ask students why you're here to get a degree, they don't say to get the skills, to get a job, and to produce.
I know.
So is there a way how that is assessed?
What do you teach?
Biology.
The gentleman who asked me about the liberal arts college and who was none too pleased with my answer just left, but I want to come back to his subject. I have a struggle, as do a lot of other people, with the fact that I was raised to believe that a college education was for my life, not for a job. I came up in a state where you could only go to Douglas College if you were in the top 5% of your class was liberal arts college for women, or you had to go to a state teachers college. There were no other places to go. I really think that when we tie the idea of an education too tightly to a job, especially a first job, when we know that so many people may have career changes over their lifetime, we are really undervaluing what the point of an education is. That said, we have to somehow figure out a better model than the typical core programs have been to mix general education with some pragmatic skills. There needs to be a new way to do it. I know our faculty are smart enough to figure it out. But we have to have people who come out at the other end, not either liberal arts or occupation, but both. I'm screaming and pleading for smart faculty to lead us down a road where, on average, the general person who comes out with a degree will not necessarily be only smart on, reading and writing and literature and, some math and science, but we'll also have some job readiness, some kind of more practical skills, and not at the expense of the higher thought skills. I don't know I fail myself all the time when I try to explain this, but I have a murky vision that there has to be another way, and somebody is going to figure this out who is a lot smarter than I. I haven't got a single tomato yet. Half a tomato, maybe.
Yes, so I just have a question about the merger, about what mechanism is going to be used to be an arbiter or oversee the process so that LSUS doesn't lose its identity. Because I have students that are pursuing graduate work now in Ruston, and there's a different word being spoken in Ruston. It's not merger, it's takeover. And they, I mean, Pfizer, for example, has merged with a lot of companies. Those companies no longer exist. And
Well, I would not call this a takeover, but I will tell you, here's the bad news. LSUS would not keep its independent identity. There is no way to do a true consolidation, a true one university making one out of two, where each retains its separate identity. That takes us right back to where we are now. It's not a change. This would be a single university with one name, with one diploma, with a unified faculty senate or university senate, with one logo. It's one institution operating in two campuses. To get there requires taking the faculty in math, the faculty in biology, the faculty in all sorts of things from the two institutions and building a stronger, consolidated, larger everything than the two institutions have separately. But there is no separate identity anymore. And you should be asking me a follow-up. So if it is the case that one has to lose the identity, why should it be us? Why not Tech? Why not make the merged institution LSU Shreveport? And the answer is that it is bigger, it has a stronger brand. There are just a lot of pragmatic reasons why it makes sense that the name would be Louisiana Tech University, and it would have a Shreveport campus and a Ruston campus. I'm sorry about that, but facts are what they are.
I was wondering if you could address a concept. If we're going to merge, and you see this one grand English department, a lot of this sounds like it's being driven by monetary concerns. Why don't they just get rid of the entire English department at LSU Shreveport, expand a 60 cap on their classes? Do you see this merger impacting jobs of faculty at LSU Shreveport? Once this paper is signed and once we go down this road, if they don't want 15 educators in English, they want 7 professors, gee, I wonder who are the ones that are not going to be retained. Do you have any ideas about that?
You know the expression, the devil is in the details. You have to agree. You have to agree that the 3 months and the kind of nature of this study does not permit us to go to the level of details of looking program by program. So I can give you some hypothetical answers. I will not even stand here and tell you that there might not be some cases where when you look across the two institutions, we would find we have more people than we need in a particular discipline. But I would caution you to adopt my view that my premise for why this would make sense is if we get to 1 + 1 = 3. I'm not interested in this because 1 + 1 would equal 1.5. So if the point is to grow from 14,000 students in the metro area and a certain number of completions a year to something larger, when I look at this, I look at down the road twice the number of faculty members in this area than what we have now. So is it possible that on a discipline-to-discipline basis, hypothetically, there might be some where we end up deciding we have more people than we need? I'm sure that there is some hypothetical possibility of that. But that's not the point of why we would do this. I think that the point should be that we would take the culture of two institutions, take the curricula, merge the strengths, and say, now we're going to lock arms and grow ourselves from here. And the point should be to get quickly to the place where the question is, when we recruit the next 3 English faculty, where do we want to base their offices? You know, do we need them more over at this campus or at that campus? I see this is only worth doing if it positions for growth, not the other way. Why on earth would you do this? To get to shrink? What would be the point? None to me. Does that help?
It helps, and quite frankly, I completely agree with your vision for the future. My problem is that in a lot of times, these kinds of mergers tends to just eliminate competition, and the future growth doesn't necessarily
You have to
take the lead in priority and policy building.
You know, that has come up. Maybe they just want to take us over so that they can shutter us and then they have free reign. I have told Dan Renault that that is out there, and it's one of the reasons why I think he wouldn't get to retire. In the odd event that this actually gets traction and gets done, I think both Vince Marcel and Dan Renault are stuck for a while from retirement dreams, because the experience and the base of what they know and the kind of knowledge of them in the community is really important. But I have told Dan Renault, and we'll tell him again tomorrow, we're presenting in Ruston, that there's a lot of skepticism. When you read the report, you're the chair of the Senate, aren't you?
Yes, right now.
Yeah. When you read the report, you'll see we go on and on and on about commitment risk, expectation risk, this kind of risk, that kind of risk. You know, I get it. I get it.
It's going to be a primary concern of most of the individuals at LSU Shreveport.
I advanced this proposition. Joe and I came up with one idea that we think is an idea of what we call mitigation of risks, and that is, I don't write statutes, but hypothetically, somebody would write a statute, because it would have to be a legislative act, that would say the legislature hereby authorizes the consolidation of A and B, effective date, you know, a year or two out, and subject to the submission to the management board and the regents of a fully detailed implementation plan showing how the consolidation will result in improvements in education. Now, I will invite you and challenge you, because I don't have to be the only word on this. Joe and I have done nothing but this for 3 months. We're kind of crazed. We would welcome some help. Anything you can think of that would be a way. Remember I said advantages and disadvantages not good enough. You don't automatically get advantages unless you do something to make it occur. And the risks may have a mitigation. So all these things that are concerns, I invite you and your many talented colleagues to think that through, because you may have some ideas on how would we be able to come closer to ensuring that the advantages happen, and what would we do that would mitigate the downsides? That's an open item.
If it makes you feel any better, we're planning another public meeting with our area legislators next Thursday, February 23rd, in UC Theater at LSU Shreveport, and we're going to be asking for that kind of input.
6 p.m.
From the legislators?
We're inviting area legislators, and some of these concerns are definitely going to be discussed, and perhaps they might give us some insight on some of that statutory language.
Yeah, they could, because, you know, I see a future where 14,000 students turns into 3 or 4 or 5 times that number.
I'd like to see that.
How many people could argue with that? If we do a better job of productivity on a per student basis, because we have, you know, consolidated some of the back office operations, and we get to save some money that we can now invest in other things, we're still going to cost the state a lot more money, because when we get more students into the system, they're going to have to pay on the formula. So it's not, in my view, it's not about spending less. It's about spending smarter, working smarter in order to do more and to get more resources to do more with.
As an end result, I think most of us agree with you.
And there are a lot of risks in doing the merger. There are a lot of risks in doing nothing. I think you got to think about that and weigh that. There is not strong evidence that the way it's been going would somehow change. We're providing for that best we know how by saying we think the possibility that the future would differ from the recent past might be enhanced by a move to the UL system where there's greater compatibility in the kind of the shared interests and not this constant Baton Rouge emphasis, that could up the chances of going about what you're doing but a somewhat different way. Maybe it would work better. But there's huge risk in doing nothing.
I've taken up way too much time, so thank you.
Well, I think others were interested. I'm tired. Is it okay? No, one more? Okay.
I have a question. Do I need to go up to the mic or?
Yes.
Okay. Just this comes to mind, and I stand in front of students every day, and this is actually the most nervous I've ever been.
Think how it is to me.
Right, exactly. I understand. Because I can agree, and I understand a lot about what you're saying. I was a student at LSUS. I'm a graduate of LSUS, and I teach out at LSUS. And there was a big reason why, whenever I had a chance, I graduated from Catawba High School, and everybody was going everywhere across the United States. And so I had a lot of choices. And, there's the choices included LSUS, Louisiana Tech, Northwestern. And there's a lot of reasons why I chose LSUS over going to Louisiana Tech. And I think as a student, well, let me ask you this. You said that students weren't interviewed.
No, we didn't do that.
Okay. I think moving forward, however you want to, however anybody chooses to go forward, you bring up the word customers. They are the customers. If I'm having a problem teaching a certain thing in the classroom, I'm best ask them, one of my students, how can I teach you better? And so I think,
I only half agree with that, but okay.
But I think it would be great to include them on some part of this conversation, simply because I think it's very easy to make these large, grand scale decisions and say, okay, now you have to do and deal with the consequences of, and I say consequences in terms of, positive, negative results, or whatever you want. But they're stuck in.
You should feel free to engage the students in the discussions about this. As a matter of fact, we had hoped initially that we could have this meeting at LSUS and make an open invitation to everyone on campus, including students, to come and hear this today. It worked out a different way. You should feel free to do that, but I want to give you one woman's opinion on this subject. There is a narrow but important difference between getting market information on what the consumer wants and letting people who should know better, like you and me, be totally dominated by those who know nothing, who are 18 years old, right? I feel I'm a great traditionalist and also a wild-eyed new thing person. I'm a little bit of a weird combination. But I think we gave up a lot of authority in the 70s. And the faculties succumb to the pressure till, the students get to decide what counts and what they need to learn and how they need to learn it. And I think a lot of that is just plain hogwash. Now, where it isn't hogwash is that Henderson, where did he go? He's always sliding out when I need him. He's got customers who are not going to tell you how to teach the course, but they do get to tell you when you teach the course, because if you don't teach it at a time that's viable for them, they can't do it. So I think that when you talk about the student input, we should be really careful. There are some things on which their opinions do matter, and we have to be responsive to them as people and as learners, but it doesn't go nearly far enough in our responsibilities to just say, well, how do you want me to teach you? You're supposed to know better, and I'm for what you think.
Okay, no, I agree, and I just think that, just as a student, a perpetual student myself, I just thought that at some point, getting their opinion.
Definitely engage them. Definitely engage them. Tech has a bigger football presence. Maybe they'll care about that. I don't. I've been accusing Renault lately of becoming a football president. I can't stand it. Maybe they like the idea of football, bigger football presence. It wouldn't move me, but I don't know. I think you should engage them. There's no reason not to. And I would have today, if we had been, over there, we would have certainly had it open to students today. I'm very tired. I did this 4 times today.
I really thank everyone for coming.
Thank you very much for putting up with us.
Thank you, Eva.
You're welcome.
Did a great job, and we appreciate this. We have said from the beginning and have wanted from the beginning to be able to have these kind of dialogues, and this is precisely what needs to happen. So let's continue the dialogue. Let's continue the thinking. Let's look at the report, read the report, think about it as it relates to, for many of you, where you work in the university. Eva, thank you for your time and your effort and your willingness to come here and answer questions for as long as people wanted. So really thank you for coming, and I appreciate it.
Good night.